Good evening and welcome to Behind Headlines. And in this programme tonight, we shall be discussing the decision made by the Israeli government back on Sunday, the 23rd of November, to bring all the remaining members of the Bnei Menashe tribe home to Israel in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. According to the Israeli newspaper Ynet, approximately 1,200 Bnei Menashe are expected to arrive in Israel by 2026, with an additional 4,600 anticipated by 2030. This initiative aims to reunite families and communities between Israelis and India, and the Bnei Menashe tribe is located in the northeast of India. As the Bnei Menashe tribe prepares to return to Israel by the end of the decade, it raises a serious question. What about the remaining 11 tribes of Israel? What role will the 12 tribes of Israel play during the Great Tribulation prophesied in the book of Revelation? And in joining me on tonight's programme, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Pastor Reagan King, and together with Pastor Tim Gutman. Guys, warm welcome to the programme. And I love doing these prophetic programmes where we're literally seeing Bible prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes. Share with us your thoughts on this announcement by the Israeli government to bring all the tribes of the lost tribe of Menashe back home to Israel by 2030.
Well, it's phenomenal, and this is something the other day I was in the kitchen and Rachel said, made comment that this is what was going to happen, and I've been reading up on it since. But we're seeing more and more of these stories of different groups who are believed to be connected to or have a tradition of connection to the lost tribes of Israel, saying we're ready to come home, we're wanting to come home, and Israel approving. In this particular instance, it reminds me of the similar approval of the return of those Jews from Ethiopia as well. And so this is massive, it's cataclysmic, it's great, it's biblical, it follows in with that. I'll gather them from the east and from the west as far as the wind has swept them. And indeed, a reminder that there in India, there was a significant Jewish community from the days of Solomon. There were some there. Traders would have been stationed there in the days of Solomon, but particularly the Persian Empire, which was stretched from India to Ethiopia, had a significant number of Jews who were displaced in that diaspora there. Thomas went to the Jewish communities in India to proclaim the gospel, and from there the gospel began to spread outside. So this is amazing. We're seeing a massive, some people think it's niche, but it's a big part of history right now.
No, absolutely. Tim, the big question is, have you found out, or do you know that the tribe that you're from? Which of the 12 tribes are you from?
Well, I assume it's Judah. Because, yeah. But I mean, these are exciting days. And as someone who, we preach as pastors, don't we, on prophecy, and you look towards the signs that Jesus is coming again soon. Well, there's always been one massive thing we're looking for, and it's that prophecy of the tribes being united. In Ezekiel, it's a prophecy about the 12 tribes being there. And these are huge days. These are exciting times. And the fact that these tribes are being discovered in places like northern India, you see them in some African countries, South America, China. I mean, these are exciting days.
No, absolutely. So let's give you an overview of tonight's Behind Headlines. So last Sunday, which was Sunday, November the 23rd, the Israeli government announced that they are planning to bring all of the remaining members of the lost tribe of Bnei Menashe home to Israel by 2030, and that translates in Hebrew, the children of Manasseh, the lost tribe, which was located either side of the Jordan River. The Bnei Menashe are a community of Tibetan Burmese Jews, and were established in 1951 in the border area between India, Tibet and Bhutan. According to Ynet News, approximately 1,200 Bnei Menashe are expected to arrive in Israel by 2026, with additional 4,600 anticipated by 2030. They're currently located in the northeastern states of India. And also we see that the Israeli cabinet has improved this important move towards Aliyah, which will cost in the region of 19 million shekels. The plan includes immigration arrangements, a conversion program, housing and adoption centers, integration grants, Hebrew language studies, and support for education and employment placements. And the Bnei Menashe tribe prepares to return to Israel by the end of the decade. Of course, the big question is what remains of the other 11 tribes of Israel. Now we're going to start off with a very significant scripture for today's program, which is from Revelation chapter 7, verses 4 to 14. It's quite a long one, so each of us shall be taking a chunk of this very interesting and significant prophetic scripture that we are reading in Revelation. So it says here from verse 4, "And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed."
After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." All the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen."
And then one of the elders answered, saying to me, "Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from?" And I said to him, "Sir, you know." So he said to me, "These are the ones who came out of the great tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Amazing. And there's that
beautiful, isn't it?
prophecy which we're waiting for to see the tribes coming home.
But isn't one aspect that a lot of Christians, and particularly those students of Bible prophecy, overlook? And that is the role played by the 12 tribes of Israel in the end times, because we've read it very, very clearly then that during the darkest periods of world history, when the Antichrist is on the throne, this is when we see God raise up these 144 Messianic Jewish believers from the 12 tribes of Israel. They're sealed and protected, and they take the entire gospel around the world. The biggest harvest for souls ever in the history of humanity will be down to these members of these 12 tribes.
Why do you think the 12 tribes are overlooked, Simon?
Because we focus on the Antichrist, we focus on Jesus actually then returning to the Mount of Olives and defeating the Antichrist, defeating Satan, setting up his millennial kingdom. We tend to overlook the fact that these are Jewish Messianic believers, and that is what a lot of the church overlooks.
Okay, and it's that last bit that I think touches on it. Why, Tim, do you think the 12 tribes and the reality of Jewish Messianic believers being involved in this, why are they overlooked?
It's that age-old thing, isn't it? If you're a messianic believer, number one, there is this, I mean, we discussed this before, you're in this rock and this hard place. By the church, they see you as almost, Jewish, not a part of us. And then, of course, the Jewish people don't see you as a part of them. So it's one of those things where as messianic believers, and actually I came to this revelation myself because we've always supported and loved Israel. And I've always quoted, I think it's I want to say Romanians. What's wrong with me? Romans 15:13, and it says this. It says, if you share in the Jews' spiritual blessing, you ought to share in material blessing. So I've always preached this, saying, guys, we should bless the Jewish people materially. But then it hit me that actually he's talking about the messianic believers in Jerusalem at this point, and blessing the messianic church, which we often overlook as well as Christians who support and love Israel. It's one of those things, isn't it?
Do you know what? There are people who look at this and say, yes, that's what it says, but is it what it means?
Yeah, and this is the big problem, and this is why I think this program is so significant today.
Absolutely.
The fact that this hidden tribe has been lost for 2,700 years, and now all of them are coming back to the nation of Israel, proves that God says what he says, and we have to believe this literally.
These tribes are not symbolic of anyone or anything else. They are the tribes of Israel, right?
Yeah. I put myself in the Simeon tribe, by the way. I've already classified myself.
Yeah, you've already put yourself there, Shimon. I've married into the tribe of Levites, so.
So you're Cohen tribe.
Exactly.
It has to be. I just have to say, it has to be. Like, God is Adonai. This has to be a God thing because, he's in control. But so many people down the ages have said, we're the lost tribes, the British Israelism, or the Mormons claim the Native Americans and whatnot. But this has to be a God thing, and it's recognized by Israel. You see that God is in control of this, and it's God that will bring, it's the Lord that will bring back and find his lost tribes.
And also the timing of this as well. To bring back all of the Bnei Menashe tribe by 2030, doesn't this also show that God is really speeding up the end time events and that we are getting so much closer to the tribulation period and the emergence of the Antichrist? And it's a warning to the church, a prophetic warning to get ready because he's coming back soon.
Well, very definitely. We know that the time is fixed. The Lord knows the day that this is going to happen, the day of his coming in glory. We know that the day is fixed by the Father, and it's going to happen. That day is hastening on, and we continue to pray along with John, who writes this beautiful vision of the heavenly realm. Come, Lord Jesus. That's our prayer. And whenever we see announcements like this, we recognize God is working in the here and now to bring us very swiftly to the there and then that we're waiting. But the children of Menashe, or the Bnei Menashe, were dispersed at the time of the Assyrian invasion of Israel and the exile of the northern kingdom of Israel that occurred around 721 BC. That was around 2,700 years ago. And that's extraordinary. We have to say it's just nothing short of extraordinary that God has kept and preserved this tribe for thousands of years, and in our times, in fulfillment of biblical prophecy, where he says, I'm going to reach and I'm going to drag you, I'm going to bring you back from the four corners of the earth. They're returning home to Israel. It's a testimony of God's faithfulness.
One of the tribes that is very well known in Israel, and I don't think you're going to know this unless you know a lot of Israelis, particularly if they have a surname called Cohen. The Cohens are known as the Levites because they are given a special place in the synagogue, a special seat for the Cohens, because the high priest is called the Ha-Kohen Ha-Gadol in Ivrit, so in Hebrew. So we know, for example, that the Levites, if they have a surname such as Cohen, then they are part of the priestly tribe.
Yeah, and that's how people will ask sometimes when my wife says we're of the tribe of Levite, it goes back. These things are passed down through oral traditions, which in Jewish communities are very reliable. The genealogies and the system of genealogy. Yes, so much was lost with the destruction of the temple and the diaspora following AD 70, but it's foolish to think and assume that everything was lost, because it wasn't. There was still thriving and surviving, if not always thriving, Jewish community, and there were many scrolls, there were many manuscripts that were written. Wherever they were dispersed, they kept records. There were Jewish communities. How do we still have Jewish communities that are together all around the world? As South America as well is another one of these groupings. In India, like we're hearing today, and again going back, Burma as well. This is a Burmo-Tibetan tribe, and so in terms of its its kind of ethnic markers, but ultimately 2,700 years ago, it's there in the north of the land, in the Kingdom of Israel.
Incredible. So let's have a look now at this old retro CBN news report dating back to November of 2014, when the Indian Jews of Bnei Menashe actually returned home to Israel in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And this is the first wave.
You're seeing members of the lost tribe of Manasseh come back to the Promised Land. Recently, they joined with family members who had already immigrated to Israel for a tearful and emotional reunion at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport. This group is part of the largest group in the tribe's history, 218, to return from India and resettle in the land of Israel.
Today is one of the most happiest day for the Bnei Menashe history, because we never had a large group like this that make Aliyah.
The Jewish Agency believes the tribe of Manasseh is located in northeastern India in the states of Mizoram and Manipur.
We are convinced that they are Jewish and they are from the tribe of Bnei Menashe. It's our duty to bring them, so we'll do that.
The flight from India to Israel lasted only 7 hours, but the arrival of the Bnei Menashe has been a journey nearly 3,000 years in the making.
I think what's happening today is nothing less than a miracle of biblical and historic proportions.
Michael Freund is the chairman of Shavei Israel, an organization dedicated to bring lost Jews back to Israel.
27 centuries after the tribe of Menashe was exiled from the land of Israel, their descendants are coming home. This is the fulfillment of everything the prophets foretold. God promised us in the book of Isaiah, "Birachamim gedolim akabsech," that with vast mercy shall I gather you in. And that's what we're seeing.
For many of these Bnei Menashe, coming to Israel is a lifelong dream.
How long have you been waiting to come to Israel?
It's a long time. From childhood.
7,000 Bnei Menashe remain in India and hope to come to Israel. In the meantime, these members of the tribe of Manasseh will start making the adjustment to a new life in Israel. They're the latest Jews to fulfill what the prophets foretold thousands of years ago, the ingathering of the exiles.
And thanks to CBN for that extraordinary story that was covering the Bnei Menashe return to Israel. So Ynet reported on the 23rd of November 2025 under the headline, Israel approves plan to bring all the remaining Bnei Menashe by 2030. The 1,200 Bnei Menashe are set to arrive by 2026, with a further 4,600 by 2030, which should complete the community's Aliyah and reunite the families that are currently divided between India and Israel. So the government on Sunday approved a broad plan to complete the immigration of the community from northeastern Indian states of Mizoram and Manipur, and under that decision the cost is projected to be about 90 million shekels, and that budget covers immigration arrangements, the conversion process, housing in absorption centres and integration grants, which includes of course Hebrew studies and placement in education and employment. A second phase, slated for completion by 2030, brings that additional 4,600 to Israel.
Yeah, and of course you're very familiar with Israel's Aliyah system and Israel's immigration. Of course, a big part of this is to do the Orpan, to learn Hebrew as part of a class, and then it's providing accommodation, and then the possibility of jobs after that as they kind of immerse themselves into Israeli culture, which, despite the fact that they're only recognized as being Jewish back in 2007, so it was only recently they were considered a Jewish, and I think that has a lot to do with DNA. But of course there is a huge drive amongst this Israeli government to actually bring them home by 2030. But it's not a straightforward case, is it, in terms of Jewish people arrive from the four corners of the world, land in Israel, and that's it. There's a whole process to integrate them within Israeli society.
Totally different environment, totally different system, totally different culture. They need to learn Hebrew. They need to embed themselves in society. If they know English already, that will be a big plus. If there's some of them who know English, that will be a big plus. If they may already speak, some of them probably do already speak and know some Hebrew. That's very, very much a potential, but they need to be placed in an environment where they can assimilate well. That's the whole idea. Assimilation and integration meaningfully into society, but no qualms or fears for them in their ability to achieve that. There's already been 4,000 of the Bnei Menashe who have arrived in Israel over the past 2 decades. So this has been an ongoing process. This is just bringing the rest over. So 4,000 have already arrived under previous government decisions. The Bnei Menashe identify as descendants from the biblical tribe of Manasseh, one of the 10 tribes exiled more than 2,700 years ago. 5,500 have immigrated so far, with many with that assistance from the Shavei Israel organization. A first delegation representing state agencies and the chief rabbinate will travel to India within a week to assess their eligibility, in line with the 2007 government decision regulating entry for groups seeking conversion and citizenship. Once approved by the Sephardi chief rabbi, who serves as president of the Supreme Rabbinical Court, immigrants will arrive with an A5 temporary residency visa. So this isn't the end of it. They're not immediately given Israeli passports or anything like that. They have a process with which to continue, and they'll likely have about 5 years before they qualify for that.
No, absolutely. And it makes me think of a time at university, and I was in a queue, I think, probably get into a bar, and I was surrounded by Indians, and they just then told me that they were actually Jews from India. Yeah. And like, there are Jews in India.
Many.
And then, there are also Jewish people in China as well. And they're saying that the Chinese alphabet is very, very similar to that of Hebrew. That's because it's all characteristics. And China's the only kind of nation in the world where the Jewish people haven't faced any Jew hatred within Chinese culture. So it's amazing to think that this ancient community is actually finally coming home. Yeah. It's interesting to see what the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said regarding the return of this lost tribe of Israel, the tribe of Menashe. So the Times of Israel reported on, again, Sunday the 23rd of November, under the following headline: Government approves to bring all Bnei Menashe Jews from India to Israel by 2030. This is what he said. He says, "I welcome the important and Zionist decision adopted today by the government, which will bring about an additional wave of immigration of the Bnei Menashe community to the land of Israel. The new immigrants will settle in the north of the country as part of the government's policy to strengthen and develop the north and the Galilee." So it's incredible, isn't it, that here we have a prime minister very similar to that of Menachem Begin when he helped the Jews of Ethiopia come home. Now it's the Jewish people, the lost tribe of Manasseh, coming back from the northeast of India in fulfillment of biblical prophecy to be completed by 2030.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, it is biblical prophecy. So a lot of those guys that we're talking about that read Revelation symbolically, or this all happened at the time of Nero, etc., there's a load of stuff happening that's kind of like proving that actually when you read it quite literally, and when you read it, that these are Jewish tribes that are going to come home, and you don't, not reading it symbolically. It really is a miracle that this tribe was found. I mean, there are, of course, cases of Jewish communities in really cut-off places that have had no Western or interference, but they've been practicing their Judaism for centuries. No one knows how, and that's that power of oral tradition. God is going to bring them home, and here's what's exciting. Like, imagine 144,000 Paul the Apostles let loose on the earth. I cannot wait.
That's a great description.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And we're just looking forward to seeing what God does in and through this in this time. This is all part of the step of preparation. everything is being moved into place. The jigsaw pieces are coming together, and it's exciting to
Absolutely.
watch.
And share also how this is part of an ongoing strengthening in the relationship between Israel and India. And this plays a major role in the closeness that the nation of India is to Israel and their cooperation on so many levels, particularly now that Israel's find herself that her traditional allies, sadly, like our nation, Britain, France, Canada, and Australia, have completely rejected Israel and supporting her enemies, namely the Palestinian terrorists.
Well, it's so important, Simon. When I was in India a couple of years ago, it was just about 2 months after October the 7th, and people there were so expressive in their support for Israel. They were so keen on just recognizing and hearing a perspective of someone who has relatives in Israel, and they assured of prayers, especially the Christian community, but not just. I mean, there are people, so many Israelis travel to India. Good reasons, not so good reasons, but there's a good relationship between the two nations. And you have many Indians who have worked meaningfully and gainfully in Israel, often in caring jobs and assistance with people in hospitals as well. A lot of infrastructure or work accomplished by people from India. So there's a very, very good system. And to be honest, you do see more people who are not Jewish, who are Eastern, from India or Thailand, someplace like that, Burma, and even some from China, than you do non-Jews from the West.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Do you want to just unpack for us the history of the tribe of Menashe? Because this is such an historic addition and prophetic addition of Behind Headlines.
Yeah, of course. So the ancient tribe of Manasseh was dispersed during the Assyrian invasion of the northern kingdom of Israel, which was about 722 BCE. The Assyrian Empire under King Tiglath the second, and later Shalmaneser V, conquered the northern kingdom and deported its population to different parts of the Assyrian Empire. Of course, Manasseh was that tribe, was the son of Joseph, and he was brought into the tribe of Jacob, brought into Jacob's family as considered one of his sons. And of course, he was the oldest, but Jacob did that famous thing when he blessed them and crossed hands, so given Ephraim the seniority. According to oral history and the traditions of the Bnei Menashe, the community in northeastern India and Myanmar, their ancestors were enslaved and exiled by the Assyrians, wandering through Persia, Afghanistan, Tibet, and China, eventually settling in their current region and living in isolation for centuries. They preserved some of their most ancient practices before largely converting to Christianity in the 20th century. However, in the latter half of the 20th century, some members began to study the Old Testament and connect their traditional customs to ancient Judaism, leading to a movement, a revival actually, and a return to their ancestral faith and homeland.
That's extraordinary. It just reminds me of the incredible story with the plight of the Ethiopian Jews, for example, that they were discovered by a Christian missionary, then followed by an Orthodox Jewish missionary who heard about this lost Jewish tribe in Ethiopia to go and visit them. And when he visited them and told them he was Jewish, they still thought that the Second Temple was residing in Jerusalem. They didn't know that the Romans had destroyed it in AD 70 and there was no Jewish temple. So it's incredible to think that they have preserved their Jewish identity, their Jewish culture and their heritage, particularly after 2,700 years when most nations and people group and ethnic minorities have blended into different host countries, that they don't have an identity anymore. But let's have a look now and watch this excellent report published over 10 years ago by the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, talking about the lost tribe of Manasseh and some of them returning home to Israel in fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
Have you ever wondered what happened to the lost 10 tribes of Israel? This is a question that has challenged Bible scholars and historians for centuries. Now, the Bible does tell us that as the Assyrian Empire came against the northern 10 tribes some 2,700 years ago, that there were members of the northern tribes who heeded the warnings of the prophets, and they fled south to Jerusalem and to the kingdom of Judea. Others who were taken into exile came back with Ezra and Nehemiah and rejoined the Jewish mainstream. And so we can say with confidence that the Jewish people we have with us today contain significant remnants of all 12 tribes. Yet there were many from the northern 10 tribes who were indeed lost to history, and the search for them goes on to this day. Now, the body that has the final say in determining who truly has Jewish ancestry are the chief rabbis of Israel who sit here in the great synagogue in Jerusalem.
In the late 1970s, a few individuals from a small group located in northeast India began to research the origins of their religious traditions and their ancestry. Their research led them to discover an ancestral connection to Israel. Under Persian rule, their ancestors traveled through the Silk Route to modern-day Afghanistan, Tibet, China, and finally to northeast India, in the midst of Myanmar and Bangladesh. This particular group, called the Bnei Menashe, or Sons of Menashe, are believed to be descendants from the lost tribe of Manasseh. In the early 1980s, members of the group made contact with an organization in Israel expressing an interest in returning to their ancient homeland.
The chief rabbis have gone and investigated these people. They found that they still observe Shabbat. They still keep the kosher dietary laws. They still celebrate the biblical feasts. They still marry only within their tribe. And they still cling to the hope of returning one day to the land of Israel. Where does this hope come from? Were the same Hebrew prophets who warned the ancient Israelites of the coming exile also left them with the hope of return. The prophet Isaiah, for instance, in chapter 43, says, "Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bring your descendants from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. I will bring your sons from afar, and your daughters from the ends of the earth." So when the prophet said, "I'll bring your descendants from the east," the Bnei Menashe clung to this hope for centuries, and the chief rabbis have now officially recognized them as having Israelite descent and approved their return to the land of Israel, and this is a modern-day miracle.
Many Bnei Menashe have already settled in Israel, and more are expected to come in September of 2012. The International Christian Embassy has pledged to sponsor the first flight of this new wave of Aliyah from India and hopes to sponsor more flights in the future.
The return of the Bnei Menashe, the sons of Menashe, to the land of Israel is one of the most exciting developments of our days. This is exactly what the Bible speaks about in Jeremiah chapter 30 verse 3, where God says He will bring back from captivity the sons of Israel, the house of Judah, back to their land to possess it. And we want to invite you to become part of this exciting end-time prophetic action of God and to place a financial seed into God's return of the chosen people to the land of Israel. Become a partner of the Christian Embassy and help us to bring the Bnei Menashe, the sons of Menashe, back to the land of Israel. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
Well, what a blast from the past with a fantastic report there on what is remaining an ongoing developing story from our good friends at ICEJ, and they do a fantastic ministry that has, I know, been a blessing not only to the Bnei Menashe but to so many others as well. The Bnei Menashe is, according to the virtual Jewish library, the name given to Judaizing groups from northeast India, mainly in the two Indian states of Mizoram and Manipur. The Bnei Menashe claimed descent from the tribe of Manasseh, one of the 10 tribes exiled from the land of Israel by the Assyrians, as we've said, 2,700 years ago, and include ethnic Chins, Lushais, Kukis, and Misos. I actually know several Chins. It's that region in Burma, so that's quite fascinating. Collectively, they're often referred to as Shinlung. The movement, if one can call it such, the Jewish Virtual Library goes on, began in the 1950s as a byproduct of colonialism and Christian missions. Remarkably, by the end of the 20th century, several Shinlung had formally converted to Orthodox Judaism. Many thousands more practiced a kind of Judaism. Others practiced Christianity while identifying themselves as descendants of ancient Israelites. By 2005, some 800 converts had settled in Israel, helped by an organization called Shavei Israel, a Jerusalem-based group that attempts to give help and succor to lost Jews seeking to return to the Jewish people. For the most part, the Shinlung do not see themselves as converts in the usual sense of the term. Like other such groups, one might cite the Bnei Ephraim, Telugu-speaking Jews of Andhra Pradesh, who believe themselves to be descended from the tribe of Ephraim. They believe they are of Jewish descent. And this controversial claim has found little support among scholars, as the Jewish Library presents, although the scholars are all the time revising and re-envisioning these things. Although gifted Israeli essayist and translator Hillel Halkin took up their cause in a colorful account published in 2002, joined in 2005 by the Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, Shlomo Amar, who recognized the Bnei Menashe as descendants of Israel formally and agreed to dispatch a Beit Din from Israel to northeast India to convert them. And in November 2017, 162 people from India's Bnei Menashe community arrived in Israel to reunite with family members and make new lives in the country, another 252 arriving in December 2020.
And of course, what we see as well with the development in science and in technology that, most people could have a DNA test. This can also then prove the kind of genetics, but I don't know how many DNA tests go back 2,700 years. But the fact is that they've kept themselves as a distinct people group with a distinct religious ideology. They identify themselves as Israelis and Jews, and of course part of the lost tribe of Manasseh also would have been handed down from generation to generation and generation, and the Lord has preserved them. It is nothing less than an absolute miracle.
It is a miracle, and it's the miracle that is modern day Israel. The nation revived, but also the language revived, and the community and the culture that's been. And how has it survived? How did the language survive? It survived because of that power of that oral tradition, that recognition. We don't belong. There's this amazing verse it's one of the prophets that says, here is a people that don't see themselves as a part of the nations. Why? Because they are God's inheritance, and they are, I love the way Hebrews puts it about the patriarchs. They were looking for a city yet to come. They don't belong to this earth, so they've always kept that distinctness, even if they're in another culture, because this is, what anthropologists tell us, is that most communities or cultures, most people that are dispersed and exiled the way the Jewish people were, whether in the northern kingdoms by the Assyrians or whether by Judah by the Babylonians, they lose their identity within a generation. And they lose their language and they lose their practices and culture, but of course the Jewish people have maintained it, and that really is a testimony of a miracle. I remember there's a famous, whether it's right or wrong, but somebody said, what's your proof of God? And somebody said, the Jewish people. It's a miracle.
Isn't that the kind of Bismarck? I think Bismarck asked one of his servants, asking him the question, how do you prove the existence of God? And the response was, the Jewish people, Your Majesty, in reference to the fact that Jewish people have outlived every single world empire. Right. Now, considering the kind of depth of Jewish history, and this is literally like an onion, you peel off one level, there's another level, and the level goes deeper and deeper. With the return of the tribe of Manasseh to Israel from northern India, for example, aren't the Jewish people and Israeli historians going to have to rethink Jewish history? because for the past 2,000 years, most people have felt, certainly since the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome in AD 70, that the only remaining tribe was that of Judah, because it was the last kingdom before it was destroyed by the Romans.
Yeah, there has been that perception. There has been that, certainly that idea that there was only one group. But I think in the Jewish community itself, that's not really been the case, because most Jews will have an idea, someone in their family anyway, will have an idea of where their family is purported to have belonged or been. And again, that's passed down orally. That's something that is through tradition. Is it all completely provable? Not always, potentially at this present moment, but there's always archaeology, there's always new evidences, there's always new things being found that indicate. But we have to remember the diasporas that occurred were not just wholesale slaughterings. They were not just diaspora of, they were not just featuring massacres of anyone and everyone. They saw the people intermarry. They saw, in one way, a suppression of roots and ethnicity through intermarriage and other things as well, and in that way. But the scattering very definitely would see ethnic markers of Jews around the world to this day.
Absolutely. And Tim, just unpack for us how, again, we see that Jew hatred is a driving force behind this Israeli government decision to bring home the remaining Bnei Menashe tribe, considering that this seems to be God's tool in order to bring the Jewish people home back to the nation of Israel. As we're seeing it in our country, we're seeing it on the continent of Europe, and now this seems to be the driving force behind this decision.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, God's tool, what the enemy meant for harm. Well, the Times of Israel reports on the 23rd of June in 2023 under the headline, India's Bnei Menashe community in crisis as Manipur is rocked by ethnic violence. NGO Shavai Israel says one Jewish victim has been killed, over 1,000 displaced, and 2 synagogues burned as houses and businesses of the minority Kuki tribe are razed. According to Shavai Israel, an NGO that helps lost tribe Jewish communities emigrate to Israel, over 1,000 members of the community, or 20% of the total, have been displaced. So one community member was killed, another was shot in the chest and hospitalized. 2 synagogues and mikvahs, which is a ritual bath, were burned down. And another NGO in Israel, Bnei Menashe, which is dedicated to supporting the Bnei Menashe community, has a long-standing feud with Shavai Israel, said one synagogue was also burned. So again, we're seeing that pattern that this persecution does bring God's people home. And we're seeing it in Europe recently, aren't we? In France, a number of French Jews have been returning over the last 10 years. We're starting to see it, sadly, in the UK, where a lot of UK Jewish people are asking, do I have a future here? And of course, God's bringing them home.
Absolutely, and also they're selling up their properties, and looks like they're leaving en masse because the hunters are here. But I suppose this, for two pastors, this must be the most exciting part of the programme, is it not? To unpack the spiritual and biblical significance of the tribe of Manasseh, particularly as it mentioned in Revelation, the book of Revelation, as we see, for example, the Bible Hub, which has an excellent discussion forum, has an excellent title saying, why is Manasseh in Revelation 7 and 8?
Well, the context of this, Revelation 7, 1 through 8, presents the 144,000 Israelites sealed for protection in the coming judgments. The list is, some might say, unusual. Dan is omitted, Levi is included, Joseph stands in for Ephraim, and from the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. The deliberate presence of Manasseh, a son of Joseph, anchors several theological, historical, and literary themes running from Genesis to Revelation. And we saw, and you referred to the fact that Manasseh was adopted by Jacob as a full-fledged tribe in Genesis 48, verse 5. At the second census in Numbers 26:34, his descendants already numbered 52,700 fighting men. By Joshua's day, the tribe was so large it received a double portion, occupying territory on both sides of the Jordan, Joshua 17 and in 22 verse 7. The eastern half, though exposed to pagan influence, produced reformers, King Hezekiah's great-grandfather, and prophets like those who came out of Elkanah's line. 1 Samuel 1:1 shows that link there. By restoration times, Manasseh is still present. 1 Chronicles 9:3, Ezekiel 48:4, proving that God never lost track of this northern kingdom tribe. There was never any, God doesn't lose track of anyone. He knows, right? The very concept of that is just completely off. So he knows everything, and he is operating in and through anyone and everyone in this situation, regardless of exile or diaspora.
Absolutely.
And look at the, so you look at for example, the omission of Dan, which is a big question. Dan and also Ephraim is counted under Joseph, not Ephraim. And I believe that goes all the way back to Judges. If you read Judges, it's kind of like this tale between two parts of Israel, the hill country of Ephraim and this tiny town, this tiny, significant, hugely prophetic town called Bethlehem. And what you have here is one represents those who are obedient to God and one represents idolatry. And right at the very beginning, you have a Levite from Bethlehem who's traveling north and ends up taking someone's Asherim, which is household gods. And then the Danites come, they take the Levite and the Asherim, go into the hill country of Ephraim, and there you have this introduction to idolatry. So some people believe their omission from Revelation is all about God's holiness, and it's a statement against the idolatry, and it's also very prophetic in terms of, God bringing back, for example, tribes like Manasseh and their role in the last days and their role in preaching that gospel. Like I said, like these Jewish apostles all over the world, what I think is amazing is that so many tribes are, we've talked about the Kohanim, who still give blessings in the synagogue, once a year. They do it like Spock, that's where Spock got it from, actually, he's Jewish. I have a friend who's tall and he has red hair, and somebody said, are you from the tribe of Benjamin? So there is, there is, and like you said, there are people with individual identities and saying, no, we're from the tribe of Ephraim. We mentioned that in India. Very significant. And God knows where they are, but these are times, and we've alluded to this, times when he's bringing them home and fulfilling that prophecy.
Amen. I love the meaning of this as well. So it says Manasseh sounds like the Hebrew word for to cause to forget. So Joseph's name is explained. God has made me forget all my hardship. Genesis chapter 41, verse 51. Revelation later promises he will wipe away every tear. Revelation 21, verse 4, including Manasseh, signals God's intention to erase the anguish of Israel's dispersion and humanity as in its tribulation. So again, it's a comforting thing, isn't it? This is such an encouragement to Israel that God has Israel, that God is sovereign over Israel, and that he's fulfilling his purposes in these times.
And he will continue to do so until the end. This is his promise. And it's one of those things, I think often of J.C. Ryle and how he was trying to hit back at a lot of the replacement theology of his day, saying, look, some of you are over-spiritualizing. You're looking at these passages and saying, no, that's not going to happen, or it can't happen, or that's impossible, it's not going to happen. He was writing very prophetically in the mid-1800s, as Charles Spurgeon similarly spoke to this, saying what many people would have thought was completely outlandish and crazy at the time, that the Jews would return to their homeland, and that they would establish an independent state, and that they would function under a specific body politic as Israel. That all happened. But there are so many who look at, and I think in some way don't fully appreciate the power of God's sovereignty and how he works and how he will bring everything to a place of fulfillment.
That's right. Yeah.
And also goes on to say that Jacob's prophetic blessing is reversed, being the firstborn child, giving Ephraim the dominant hand, but still praising Manasseh. would become a people, and he too would be great, according to Genesis chapter 48, verse 19. And Revelation 7 fulfills that promise. Both the sons of Joseph are present, Ephraim indirectly as Joseph, and Manasseh by name, establishing a corporate greatness in the end times remnant. So we also see as well, I mean, we talked a bit about Dan, why Dan is not here. And of course, that is one of the big speculations, why the tribe of Dan is no longer part of the 12 tribes of Israel. But I think we pretty much unpacked that, and you unpacked it very well, because of idolatry and that Levite, the crimes that Levite committed were beyond horrific. If anyone reads the full account, probably one of the darkest chapters, I think, in the whole entire Bible, that one.
Absolutely, and what it did was it introduced that idolatry to God's people. I mean, God's people, there was always idolatry they were struggling with, but this, I mean, Dan as well, don't forget Bethel and the golden calves, and there was so much idolatry in Israel's past that infected and eventually infected the whole nation and led to their exile. And of course their exile was prophesied as a result of the idolatry, and of course Dan being central to that, Bethel and the golden calves, and of course this incident that goes all the way back to Judges. And you see, and it's the same with us as believers. We have to learn this. You know, there are those who you go after the things of God and you want the things of holiness, but then when you go astray and you want the things of this world, that's what it represents. The hill country of Ephraim, Bethlehem, you know, and it's like trusting God, and it's a sad part of Israel's history, I think. You know?
And show the significance as well, Reagan, that the only tribe that doesn't have a land allotted to it is the Cohens, the tribe of Levites.
Yeah, so the Levites, their inheritance is the Lord. That's how it was always put. Your inheritance is the Lord your God. They had cities, and they had whole cities in which they would live, but they didn't have any set land that was their inheritance. And so they functioned not in an isolated or regional sense, but they functioned throughout the land. You can think of like salt, seasoning, or like leavening bread. They were throughout the entirety of the land of Israel in these cities, in these pockets. Exactly. And so those were where they were based. They didn't have to till the land. They didn't have to guard after the land, because their primary focus was dedication to their priestly role, which God gave them.
Which is incredible. And of course, we know the story of what happened when the Levites did not carry the Ark of the Covenant up to Jerusalem. And we know what happened there. So this is something that they are in charge of, the Ark of the Covenant. They're in charge of the kind of blood sacrifices. But it's also interesting as well, because this is another indication of how important the tribes are during the tribulation period, because we know that the third temple will be rebuilt. There will be the sacrifices on the temple, like we saw with the first and second temples. And again, we're going to see those temple sacrifices of the red heifers that apparently now in Shiloh, they're testing whether they could be sacrificed as a pure calf in order to have a pure sacrifice for the rebuilding of the third temple.
And if you were to, if you were to explore, for example, the Temple Institute's website, you'd be amazed at how close we are to, the big thing, of course, is politics and this golden dome thing that sat there on the Temple Mount. But when that has worked out, and this will be key to a peace treaty, I think, everything is set up. The Temple Institute, they've been, getting a lot of the things ready. And, like you mentioned as well, we've found a red heifer, I think, in Texas. And they've been breeding them and practicing. And, these are, if people watch these things and look at these things, you would say, you know what, there's not actually a lot that needs to be set up still. Everything is kind of like ready. We're kind of, we are at 1 minute to 12, and this is why, I think the message is for us as believers is now is not the time to be asleep,
Amen. And also just unpack the important role that the tribe of Manasseh will actually play during the tribulation period, because we know that according to Revelation 30 as well, that they are kind of protected from the beast system, that the beast cannot destroy them. I think it's for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period, but essentially they are God's evangelists.
Yeah, the reality is, and we have to be very, very clear on this, is that salvation is found in no other name apart from Jesus. These individuals who are set apart and who are marked out by the Lord here are going to be proclaiming Yeshua HaMashiach, right? They are going to be proclaiming one gospel. There's one Lord. And so as they do, God, he guards his people, he protects his people, and he uses them and leads them in accordance with his perfect plan and purpose. How all of that is going to play out in the specific immediate sense, we can read what the text says, and we take it at face value, and that's what we're supposed to do, really, recognizing the surrounding context of it. But the clarity is that God will lead, and he will bring his people to that place of accomplishing his utmost plan and purpose.
Absolutely, and I just love what it says here, and this is from Bible Hub, that a preview of global redemption, the 144,000 messianic believers are followed immediately by a great multitude that no one could count from every nation. Revelation 7 verse 9. Manasseh, whose mother was Egyptian, Genesis in chapter 41-45 overshadows the Gentile inclusion. So again, we see that Jew-Gentile combination, which is amazing. But as we sum up with the last 2 minutes to go, Tim, just don't reflect for us how exciting the times that we're living in, that we should not be fearful, we shouldn't be anxious, but we should actually be excited because we see biblical prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes, particularly as we see that the lost tribe of Menashe from India coming home to Israel in the next 5 years.
Huge, and it's exciting, like you said. In the context of the New Testament, when they talk about eschatology, or they talk about the last days, if you like, it's, guys, celebrate, look up, your salvation is near now. As believers, we have nothing to fear, and as believers as well, we keep our eye on God's prophetic dealings with the nations. You keep your eye on Israel, and why would you not have a heart for God's people? Why would you not have a heart for his chosen ones?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so as we continue to thank God for his working through time and space, fulfilling his perfect plan and purpose, we rejoice in this news.
No, it's incredible. So Tim and Reagan, thank you so much for joining me on this very significant and important Behind the Headlines as we unpack the incredible unfolding of the days in which we're living in, which is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And we also know, for example, the tribe of Manasseh will play a major role not only in the tribulation period, but also in the millennial kingdom, as being one of those 12 tribes of Israel that will rule and reign with Yeshua from Jerusalem to the four corners of the earth. So we can look up knowing that our redemption draws near, that our Messiah is returning very quickly. And so now is the time not to be indifferent or complacent, but now is the time to get ready, because we know that the end time events are rapidly unfolding before our very eyes. And this is another prophetic signpost, the return of Bnei Menashe to Israel in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. So thank you for watching this week's Behind the Headlines.